Thank you, Dan. So good afternoon, everyone. So my pleasure to be here. I would like to thank first the organizer for the invitation and getting you as well. Here my disclosure and my mission of the day is to try to provide you a balanced vision if we should, whether or not, start E CPR on the scene, on the field. So we have seen that the length of the low flow is very important. And we know that within 16 minutes of CPR, 90% of patients with good functional outcomes had achieved ROSC. And after 16 minutes of CPR, less than 1% of good functional recovery. So definitely our challenge when we are talking about eCPR is to beat the clock. And we have data to show that for eCPR, we have a very poor prognosis, poor outcome if we are over 60 minutes. 60 to 80 minutes is probably the limit because after 60 or 80 minutes, we have very poor outcome and ECMO is probably totally futile. So we have seen since a decade, thanks to large registry like the ELSO registry, that the number of eCPR has increased year after year, but the hospital survival is exactly the same. We don't know exactly why, we don't have such explanation, but one of the probable explanation might be that we haven't found the way to reduce the low flow duration. And we need and we can find some strategy to try to improve the outcome of this population and to try to reduce the low flow to increase the probability of survival to discharge. So for that, we know the current management of this patient, which is no flow, less we have the basic life support. Then depending of what is the organization in your country, but then you have advanced life support. Then the patient is usually transferred and might receive ECLS. So we have two strategies. We have the first one, which might be called the scoop and run strategy, when you have the no flow, which we want to target patient with the lowest no flow that we can. And then we have a basic life support that may be provided by paramedics or firefighters, and then your patient, when the cardiac arrest is, the CPR is too long, maybe over 20 minutes, then you can rush the patient to the first ECMO center, the closest ECMO center to receive ECLS. This is a scoop and run strategy. And on the other side, we may have the stay and play strategy, which might be you have still the no flow, you have still the basic life support by firefighters and paramedics, depending where you are. And then you have a medical ambulance, which will provide advanced life support. And then after a couple of minutes, then the ECMO mobile team is moving on the field, moving on the scene, and cannulate the patient on the scene. So I will try to investigate what are the benefit, advantage, and also disadvantage of both strategies. So what about the scoop and run? The scoop and run, the rationale for using this strategy might be this study. This is the observational study in non-rural counties from 2009 to 2011, showing that they're trying to compare the effect of BLS versus ALS on outcomes after out of hospital cardiac arrest. They did a probability score. They had a very large final sample with more than 30,000 final samples. And they compare what was the probability of survival, and quite unexpectedly, they demonstrate that with a BLS strategy versus a BLS plus ALS strategy, probably the survival was much better at 90 days. The survival was better, but also the patient got a better neurological outcome at hospital discharge. So it might be the rationale for using a scoop and run strategy. But if you use a scoop and run strategy to provide ECMO the earliest that you can, you need to be very reactive and probably to think about ECMO after only 20 minutes of unsuccessful CPR. This was demonstrated in this study from Japan, showing that after such a very strict strategy, after only 20 minutes of unsuccessful CPR, you rush the patient to the cath lab, and they show that they got a better survival with 22% survival at 3 months without any significant differences regarding the cerebral performance at 3 months. Another team that has done that and that has compared this strategy versus conventional management of this patient, showing that in the Minnesota, showing that if you face to a refractory shockable rhythm out of hospital cardiac arrest, then after 20 minutes you rush the patient to the cath lab, provide ECMO support, hypothermia, and angiography, and they show that they got a very good result at the end with 45% survival compared to only 15% survival in the conventional management. And when we look deeper, what were the timing, what was the duration of the CPR before CLS, you see that everything is within 1 hour. So 1 hour is probably 60 minutes, probably the major threshold that you need to target. And more recently, this is a publication from Australia, from Melbourne, and they report the activity with 11 out of hospital cardiac arrest, more than 30 minutes. Then the patient, if the patient is younger than 65 years old, if it's a cardiac arrest with weakness, if no flow is less than 10 minutes, and if it's a shockable rhythm, then they rush the patient to the E CPR center. They provide mechanical CPR on the way to the hospital, provide hypothermia as well, ECLS, and they show that their survival with CPC 1 or 2 was 45% at ICU discharge. And again, you see that the low flow is less than 1 hour. So we can't definitely say that this attitude, this behavior is better than conventional, than standard CPR, and we still need data. There is one randomized control trial in the pipe doing by the Czech Republic, trying to compare these two strategies. On the other hand, you can say, okay, the patient is too unstable to go to the ELS, to the ECMO center, so maybe it's easier to move a mobile ECMO team on the field and to cannulate the patient on the field and then retrieve the patient safely to the ECMO centers. And what is the rationale for this strategy? It might be this very recent study in resuscitation showing that if you add BLS plus early ALS care, it means that probably you will have a higher chance of survival at hospital discharge. So this is done in Paris. It doesn't mean that you need to do it everywhere, but at least it was reported in Paris with medical ambulance. In Paris, in the medical ambulance, there is always one doctor, one nurse, and one driver, and this is like a mini ICU with everything in the ambulance, all that you need. So they report the rescue of one patient in the Louvre Museum. So you can see these pictures. It was diffused in many newspapers. And so it was a 66-year male receiving 2 shocks from the defibrillator after he collapsed in the museum. Then 19 minutes later, after 19 minutes, BLS provided by firefighters and the security of the museum, the medical ambulance came, intubate the patient, and then start mechanical CPR and call for ECLS implantation with the mobile ECMO team. After 23 minutes of cannulation, the ECLS was running after 19 minutes. So they have, this team have already done that in a couple of other situations. You may have ECMO in the subway, ECMO in the supermarket, ECMO in the street. So you can do that, it's doable to do that on the scene, on the field. And they report the results, which are quite interesting. They compare two periods, one period when they did in-hospital E CPR, and then they did in-hospital E CPR during period 2, but after standardization of the thing, after writing a procedure, after selecting patient, after special training of dispatch centers, firefighters, and medical ICU, mobile ICU. And they select only this kind of patient, witness, no flow less than 5 minutes, no comorbidity, shockable rhythm. And they provide a ECPR team available on a 24/7 basis, and that might be called when you have a cardiac arrest for more than 20 minutes on the field. And what is interesting is to see that when they compare the two periods, they were able to dramatically, significantly reduce the low flow time, and also they were able to improve their final result, which is what is important for us at the end, is the proportion of patients with CPC 1 and 2. So if I do ECPR on the scene, I need first to have an ECPR team available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. I need to have a special training of dispatch centers, firefighters, mobile ICU, ECPR team. So I need to have a very complex organization. So the first question is it really, is there any benefit to do that? We don't have the answer yet. There is actually an ongoing randomized control trial on that, comparing two strategies, one strategy with transfer in hospital ECPR, and the other one, which might be pre-hospital ECPR and then retrieve the patient. Should we always do ECPR on the scene? Probably not. If I took this patient from the Louvre, if I apply another strategy with this patient. So remember that ECLS was effective after 90 minutes. And if I just plot on the Google map what is the distance between the Louvre Museum and my hospital, which provide ECMO very quickly with a well-trained surgeon, you see that it's only 30-minute driving. So if I apply to the patient from the Louvre this other strategy, which might be the scoop and run strategy, you see that I will apply a BLS for 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes, I will say, okay, let's put mechanical CPR and drive fast to the nearest center, and then it will be only 30 minutes to get there, 23 minutes, same timing for ECLS implantation, and at the end, it's only 51 minutes. So probably this strategy is not suitable every time for all patients. It might be suitable for exceptional situations when it's very complex to move the patient out of the house, especially because in urban area, distance is not the main limit, is not the only one limit for ECPR. You may have vertical, but you may have also horizontal limits with traffic jam, which might give a good rationale for ECPR on the scene. And at the end, we may ask us what is the final cost of all these things, because you need to have an ECPR team available on a 24/7 basis, so it will cost money at the end, and this is unknown yet. So what might be the future? Just for showing that if you target a very special event, a high-risk event for cardiac arrest, like the marathon or the half marathon in Paris, They did that with the SAMU. SAMU is a medical ICU, a mobile ICU, when they got pre-equipped with a ready-to-use ECLS device, and they were on the scene. And in 2010, they retrieved this patient, 45 years old male, cardiac arrest at the 25th kilometer, bystander CPR, ECMO prime in the SAMU ambulance, ECMO initiated within 45 minutes after cardiac arrest, anterior myocardial infarction, PCI, ECMO, win after 10 days. But however, the patient died due to anoxic encephalopathy. So another way to do that might be to target very high-risk events such like marathon, half marathon. So in Paris, you can run safely because there is always a SAMU close to the race. For what I know yet is that for both strategy, you need to have a patient triage. We don't want ECMO. We don't want that ECMO become a new way to die. So you need to have a patient triage. We have seen in the literature that the strong impact of the no flow, this is in white, you see only the alive patient, and you see that all alive patient has less than 5 minutes no flow. The low flow is also very important, and you see that the longer the low flow, the higher the number of patients dying. And the ETCO2 is probably very important as well, with ETCO2 less than 10 at cannulation. So for that, you have guidelines. This is only the French one, but every country has its own guidelines. So for us, when you have uncertainty, to propose ECMO for E CPR, you should have a ETCO2 above 10 and a low flow less than 100 minutes. So who should benefit from E CPR? Definitely young patient, on-site, witness cardiac arrest, no flow less than 5 minutes, bystander CPR. The cardiac arrest should be of presumed cardiac origin with initial shockable rhythm, and ETCO2, end-tidal CO2 more than 10 millimeter mercury under CPR. And what is probably more important is the collapse to ECMO time should be roughly less than 60 minutes. For the conclusion, I would say that, yes, refractory cardiac arrest patient can benefit from E CPR on the scene or in hospital. Both strategy might be valuable, only if ECMO runs within 60 minutes of collapse. And for that, you need to activate your ECMO team after 10 minutes CPR, but it will mainly depend on what is your pre-hospital organization in your country. If we compare those two strategies, scoop and run to the nearest ECMO centers with E CPR, automatic CPR, it's probably cheaper, but I do not have the right answer in urban areas. But what we know is that we definitely need to change our paradigm, and we need to take a very quick decision after only 10 minutes of refractory cardiac arrest. If you want to have good results, you need to have a protocol, you need to have a standard procedure and to respect it. But definitely research is needed, and with always good neurological outcome as primary endpoint. And we have one randomized controlled trial in the pipe in Paris. Thank you very much.